Hi, Duncan. Thanks for joining me on Voices in Transformation. I'm going to jump straight in and ask you a question about the state of the supply chain today. So, what signals or trends convince you that we're entering a, I don't know, fundamentally different era? What does this next chapter look like to you?
Well, obviously, the level of uncertainty that's being introduced to running a supply chain based on, climate change, regional conflict, you name it, right, is made it increasingly difficult to manage supply chains on behalf of customers in sort of a cost-efficient, profitable way.
But you said it, the word volatility and change and so forth. And so I think some of the big challenges that people are having is how to manage through that. And I know we've been talking for years about digital transformation, but AI, which you can't talk about digital transformation without talking about AI, feels like a real step change. So, what's your prediction? And I'm not going to hold you to it, but what's your prediction for how AI is going to, I don't know, materially reshape supply chain decision making over the next few years?
I think that the antidote to sort of all this uncertainty and managing supply chains, with less inventory, freight, labor, all those types of things, is really what I would refer to as machine speed and precision, right?
Mm.
The faster something runs and the more precisely it runs, by definition, the more agile and efficient it is, right? And that's always been the role of technology when applied to supply chains throughout time. And you can think about the invention of lots of different things. It's so when something becomes dramatically faster, it's not just it actually introduces profound structural change. And I think when you look at the technology being applied to supply chain, AI is sort of this last piece here that gets us closer to something we've talked about in this industry for a long time, which is this idea of an autonomously, intelligently driven supply chain. And I think that agentic and AI technology isn't just about machine precision, but it actually allows us in some cases to finally take the human out of the loop. And the human, unfortunately, is always the slowest component in a machine or a system.
Yeah, but it opens the human does create a lot of human error, hence the term.
Mhm.
But I think where are the opportunities for humans in the age of AI and supply chain?
I think it allows human work to be elevated because now you're spending time actually managing the machine. You're not actually doing the work of the machine. So you're spending more time on these are my business objectives. This is what my consumers want. You're spending more time collaborating with other stakeholders around things like that. You're setting guardrails for the AI. And where necessary, you're coming in and actually sort of reviewing the work of AI. Humans exist in these workflows because sometimes there's ambiguity or trade-offs are required in your business. And that's when the AI brings it to you and says, hey, this is something that I haven't seen before, and I sort of want your opinion on it before I go execute.
And there are a lot of supply chain people that have seen a lot of things, certainly, especially over the last few years. Um, so, what does a true AI powered supply chain look like?
I would say, first of all, I hear this a lot from companies I go talk to about supply chain and the role of AI and agentic is they're generally focused on the wrong unit of transformation. The question I get is, hey, how can I run my supply chain with fewer planners or fewer logistics coordinators or fewer warehouse managers? And that's actually not the question. These companies don't exist to hire people. They exist to put product on shelves in a grocery store and drive good availability and less waste, or make great products and get them to customers. That's why you exist. You care about the outcomes, revenue, cost, and happy customers. And the question you should be asking is not how I can do it with fewer people with AI, but how does it actually drive better outcomes for my business and my consumers? And that requires not thinking about the unit of transformation as the person, the user, but actually the system. How do I use agentic AI technology to dramatically transform the entire system?
Tell me a little bit more about agentic AI and AI in general, because I know you guys have been spending quite a lot of money investing in AI. So, talk to me a little bit about some of the AI enhanced solutions that you announced, or your agents, and can you give us some practical examples of AI in action?
Sure, yeah. So we're about just north of $2 billion that we've invested in what we call cognitive solutions, which are all cloud native, AI native applications. And a lot of times I tell people that with cognitive solutions, the agent is the app, and you give people and businesses the ability to configure how much autonomy they want to give an agent. So each individual solution that ships has a bunch of what I would call almost like productivity agents in it that help augment human work. And in some some cases, they can actually automate things that humans don't need to be involved in anymore. And then we have a set of agentic capabilities, which are more like what I talked about at the system level. So an example, just let's think about just a classic everyday example. You have a warehouse. Let's say it's for a retailer, and you have trucks or lorries coming in on the inbound, right? And they're unloading them and they're picking, and then they're putting them on the outbound lorries and they go to stores. Okay. And let's just say one of those trucks is going to be late. It's going to be late by 2 hours. And so the time it was scheduled to arrive at the distribution center, the dock door it was going to is no longer available. There are other trucks there. What do you do? Well, normally a human's in the loop and they're like, oh, well, so does it matter that this truck is late? Why don't I just wait until there is a door available? Let me call the stores and see if that's going to drive the stock out at the shelf, and we don't want that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, hey, these are the 5 best doors and trucks that I should actually think about reprioritizing and giving to this one. But then I have to reach out to those carriers. So there's all this coordination that takes place all the way back to the carrier and all the
Yeah.
way down to the shelf. And that's very, very hard for a human to do when you're actually orchestrating an entire system. So that's where we use an agent, right? So the agents can actually use machine learning and AI to predict the likelihood of a stock out in a store and the financial impact of that. It can automatically do the trade-offs, which a human normally does, across the 5 other trailers that it can reprioritize. It can actually call the carrier and understand what's happening there. So it's agentically orchestrating the entire system. It's not about how can I automate away a logistics planner or a store person. It's agentically enabling a better system.
I mean, that's just a great example. So thanks for that. I want to talk a little bit more about how you make or how companies can make the most out of technology, which, let's be honest, sometimes moves a lot faster than organizational change, right? So, what do you see as barriers within organizations that slows the speed of transformation? And how can these companies overcome it?
It's absolutely change management, right? And you've got decades of organizational muscle memory around something. So I hear all the time when people are giving themselves solace around AI and all these jobs are going to be eliminated, they use the sort of bank teller example. And when ATMs, automated tellers, came along, bank teller jobs actually went up for years. So, it's Jevons paradox. You make something cheap and efficient and we consume more of it, not less. And what people miss, though, is that also coincided with the deregulation of the US banking industry. And you had community banks and regional banks. So actually, in aggregate, they went up, but per branch, they went down quite dramatically. But that was just automating a job, right? So you were automating, check my balance, give me money. And the teller inside turned into a relationship person. They sold products and dealt with customers, right? It wasn't until the mobile phone came along that the branch itself was disrupted because now the branch was in your pocket. And that was sort of where you saw, by the way, if you look at the statistics, bank teller jobs dropped off the edge of the earth. So there's a difference between automation and complete transformation, right? And a lot of times when new technology comes along, the first thing we do is I call it filming theater. When the motion camera came along, the first thing we do is film theater. We didn't actually think about how the medium changed and what was possible and reimagine everything. And that's sort of the ATM versus the phone. And we're doing the same thing with AI. It's back to how can I automate what someone just does today versus stepping back and saying, how does this actually create completely new categories of things we couldn't do before, right? On behalf of the business, revenue cost, and consumers. And it's just change. I think it was, God, who was it that said it? But it was almost like sometimes experience is the worst thing you can have when you're innovating, right? It's the beginner's mind. So that's the biggest obstacle.
Thanks so much for being here on Voices in Transformation. And I'm sure we'll see you again. I look forward to seeing what you guys do.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for having me.